Brace yourself, because the trolls are coming through. We're getting closer and closer to the upcoming release of the new Call of the Mountain set for Legends of Runeterra that's scheduled to release on August the 26th. Today, as we expected, the Runeterra team revealed more Freljord cards from the next set, including the new Freljord champion, Trundle. And we even got a few more Targon cards revealed as well. In this video, we'll be talking about Trundle, as well as all the other new cards shown today. And as always, I'll be giving some additional thoughts on what types of decks these cards could end up in. I'll even be doubling back a little bit to the Freljord cards that were spoiled yesterday when I talk about Trundle, since the viability of some of those cards have definitely changed. Before we jump in, if you like this type of content and want to see more, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future coverage from me. Let's get right into the troll of the hour first. Let's talk Trundle. And we'll talk about Ice Pillar together with Trundle, since that just makes sense. So Trundle is a 5-mana 4/6 champion with regeneration, and it reads, when I'm summoned, create an Ice Pillar in hand. Trundle's level requirement is that he has to see you play Ice Pillar. When he levels up, he is a 5/7. He gains Overwhelm on top of regeneration, and when he's summoned, you still create an Ice Pillar in hand, but he gains another ability. Every time he attacks, you grant him +1/+0 for each 8 cost card you behold. Ice Pillar is an 8-mana 0/8 unit with Vulnerable. When you play it, you refill 8 mana. Also, when you play it, and at the start of every round, give the strongest enemy vulnerable this round. So let's focus on Trundle first. Freljord is getting its first 5-mana champion, and this is a good one. I've got a lot to say about Trundle, and pretty much all of it is good. First off, a 4/6 stat line is probably the second best stat line in the game for a 5-drop, next to being a 5/5, and it's very close. A 4 power doesn't quite deal with some of the units you want it to. Champions like Garen and Gangplank, and even some followers like Avaros and Hearthguard or Enraged Yeti tokens come to mind. But 6 health is really tough to deal with in this game, especially if that unit has regeneration like Trundle does. You have to use stuff like Vengeance and Thermogenic Beam to cleanly deal with this guy, and those cards will almost always take up your entire turn to play. I'll admit I was fully expecting Trundle to be an 8-mana unit and work as a payoff card himself for the Behold mechanic that was first shown yesterday. But the fact that he costs 5 and creates an 8-mana card for you makes him even better. This reduces what's called deck building cost, or basically the decision you make to add a certain type of card in your deck, whether that's based on mana cost or otherwise. Usually deck building cost comes into play in decks where you need to add certain cards in your deck to try and help you meet specific conditions of other cards in your deck. Basically, playing Trundle means you don't have to run as many other cards in your deck that cost 8 mana or more, and he'll naturally make Freljord Behold decks more consistent. There's not much to say about his level 2 other than the extra stats and attack ability are just icing on the cake. I could see Trundle buffing his power by 2 with every attack being very common. And that buff is permanent, by the way. So between that and also gaining Overwhelm, he can snowball pretty hard. Trundle can be played in a lot of different decks, but that's because he'll go hand in hand with the next card we'll be talking about. And we'll be talking about those decks as well when we get to that. I will say one other thing before we get to Ice Pillar and the rest of the cards. Trundle has made 2 of the 3 Behold cards spoiled yesterday go up quite a bit in viability in my opinion. Faces of the Old Ones is looking better now. Definitely comparable to Wording Stones, and maybe better than Stones in a Behold deck. I don't think you go all in on a ramp strategy and play both of them together though. That's too many units that can't damage other units at all. Speaking of which, Troll Scavenger is looking much better as well, but I don't think you play Troll Scavenger with Faces of the Old Ones either. I think players will need to choose between having an early game ramp strategy to play Trundle on round 4, or forego the ramp for a more proactive strategy with Troll Scavenger. If you try to play both of those units that cost 2 mana each together, your deck isn't going to be as cohesive. You're not going to have time to play both cards and have it to where they both benefit you. Troll Ravager doesn't get better with Trundle now being revealed, but it was already a good card. Unfortunately, as I feared, Trundle does not make Uzgar the Ancient better. If anything, Trundle makes Uzgar an even worse pick for Behold decks, for the exact reasons I mentioned yesterday. There are just better options to play in other regions, and even Freljord itself. Let's briefly talk about Ice Pillar before moving on. The fact that this refills your mana gives this a lot of combo potential, even if that potential isn't realized in this set. The real attraction here is that this will grant the strongest enemy unit vulnerable every single round. So Ice Pillar will likely end up giving you a lot of board control. Even if it only gives something vulnerable for 2 rounds, that's good enough. Speaking of which, I think this having vulnerable itself is a fair drawback for a unit that has 8 health, refills your mana when played, and has additional board impact with throwing vulnerable around every turn. Quite a few people have been saying this has synergy with Ezreal, and I can see that. Frostbite Ezreal that plays Trundle in the 5 mana slot instead of Vi is pretty intriguing. But let's talk about the rest of the cards. Let's start off with Augur of the Old Ones. This is a 6 mana 5/5 with Overwhelm and Regeneration. When you play this, if you behold an 8+ cost card, grant an ally Overwhelm and Regeneration. This card is insanely good. This opens up so many possibilities for Trundle. First off, let's get this out of the way. If you're going to play Augur of the Old Ones, you have to play Trundle alongside it. This goes back to Trundle giving you a way to activate your Behold cards for no additional cost with Ice Pillar, something that this card absolutely needs in order to use its ability consistently. But let's talk about the other cards that Augur works extremely well with. I'll just say that I think one of the best pairings for Augur, and by extension Trundle, is going to be Demacia. Augur is amazing with cards like Swiftwing Lancer and Radiant Guardian if you've managed to activate it. Cards you could run that cost 8 mana or more are Judgment, Bright Steel Formation, possibly Tiana Crown Guard, or maybe even Unyielding Spirit. Based on what I mentioned yesterday when we talked about Behold, Shadow Isles is potentially another very good candidate. I could definitely see a powerful mid-range deck running Augur, Trundle, and some of the other Behold units and topping things off with the Harrowing. Of course, there's some of Freljord's own cards like Avaros and Hearthguard and any Yeti tokens you might be drawing from other cards. Vi from Piltover and Zaun is also an option, but Piltover and Zaun doesn't have a lot of options at 8 mana or more that would synergize well with this style of deck. Progress Day is a pretty good card, and people try to run it in mid-range decks because in theory, it helps you refill your hand after you've run out of gas. But the problem with that is Progress Day doesn't impact the board at all, and mid-range decks want all their cards to have some type of board impact. Not only that, it almost always takes up your entire turn to play. That's why Progress Day has always fit better in more control or combo type decks with a lot of spells, because those decks are reactive in nature. They don't try to dominate the board, they just want to control the board with spells and slow down their opponent's units long enough for their win condition to come online, which is usually Ezreal, or in the past, Heimerdinger. Next up we have Trundle's Ice Quake, or rather Ice Quake. This is an 8 mana slow spell that gives all units -3/-0 this round, and you deal 3 to all units. In the case of Trundle's Ice Quake, you shuffle a Trundle into your deck. So this is Trundle's champion spell, and the effect is pretty familiar to me and will be to anyone that came from the same card game I did. But this one is a bit souped up, and it's in a game that gives you guaranteed mana, so the chances of being able to play this card go up quite a bit. Does that mean you should play this card? Only in very specific decks, I feel. To be clear, this does have synergy with quite a few of the troll cards that were recently revealed because they have regeneration or grant regeneration to other units. The one big issue is that this card also reduces the power of your units significantly in addition to your opponent's. So even if you could clear your opponent's side of the board while keeping yours alive, there's a good chance your units won't be able to finish the game unless your opponent's nexus is very low. There is some other synergy with fearsome units, but then you have to look at fearsome units that have a lot of health to begin with. Swain comes to mind, but then there's basically nothing else. The other ones that are remotely playable are mostly in Shadow Isles and mostly also cost 8 mana or more. That might sound good, but then you run the risk of making your deck too slow. So based on that, unless we get some other good cards that work very well with Ice Quake, I don't think it's going to see any real play this expansion. Next we have Revitalizing Roar. This is a 7 mana slow spell. You pick a unit in your hand to reveal, and you heal your Nexus by its power. If you're enlightened, you also reduce that unit's cost to 0. So this effect is strong for sure, especially after you hit 10 mana for the enlightened text. This card has one big problem though, that will keep this from seeing any significant play. It has the combination of costing 7 mana and being a slow speed spell. I think if either of these were different, this card would potentially be much better. In fact, go ahead and name off the number of slow spells that cost 7 mana or more that actually see ranked play. I'll wait. Yeah, there's only 2. The Harrowing and the Ruination. And the reason they're played is because they either literally win you the game immediately, in the case of the Harrowing, or prevent you from losing the game or falling too far behind, in the case of the Ruination. For this to see real play, it would have to be buffed in some way. Either its mana cost would have to be significantly reduced, or it would have to be upgraded to a fast spell. Let's finish things up by talking about the 2 Targon cards spoiled, starting with Broadback Protector. This is a 4 mana 2/7, and at the start of the round, you heal your Nexus 3, and you deal damage to me equal to the amount healed. Yet another card that has excellent synergy with Augur of the Old Ones. Though granted, if you play this on round 4, this card will need to survive for 2 rounds to get the buff from Augur, unless you're playing any ramp cards. At worst, this will likely heal you for 3 and probably be able to block a unit once without dying, but it probably won't kill the unit it's blocking either. I'm not sure if this card will be good enough to play in Behold decks, especially given that your plan will likely be to play Trundle after you play this and then Augur to buff this card. At that point, this card has 1 health, and if it even so much as gets pinged, then your Protector Augur combo isn't looking that great. If it does go off, you'll have healing for the rest of the game as long as your opponent doesn't have a card that deals 4 damage to this, or a Culling Strike, which this card is bad against, more so than other 3 power or less units. This card is good, but I'm not quick to call this a staple yet by any means. And finally, we have Resplendent Stellacorn. This is a 5 mana 4/5 unit, and when you play it, you heal an ally and your Nexus 3. The most majestic card on this list in a room full of trolls. I think this card is pretty good in a vacuum, but it's hard to evaluate how good it'll actually be. This is mainly because we don't know what the rest of the Targon cards are. I will say I don't think you play this in Tark decks, certainly not over Mountain Sojourners, who fits Tark's game plan much better than this. If we do get some type of healing-centric champion, something the game has yet to see, I could definitely see this getting played in a deck like that. Other than that, maybe this could see play in a Vladimir deck, since Vlad decks focus on injuring their own units, so you could heal a unit back up to get even more value out of it with your other cards. But Vlad has historically been one of the weaker champions in the game though, only seeing a good amount of play once in the history of ranks so far, when he got paired with Sejuani during the early days of Rising Tides. Not much else to say about this card, unfortunately. The jury will have to stay out on this one until the rest of the Targon champs get revealed. That's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this look into the rest of the Freljord cards spoiled today. If you did, feel free to leave a like, as it really helps me out and gets this video out there to others in the community. If you don't want to miss future coverage of the new set from me, subscribe to the channel and don't forget to hit the notification bell below to make sure you know when the next video goes live. Feel free to check out the other places you can find me on the internet in the video description below. You'll find my Twitter, Twitch channel, and we have a community Discord as well that you can join. Thanks for taking time out of your day to watch this, and I'll see you next time. Take care.